Hey, I'm Carolyn Cameron from Sportsnet, and welcome to Stage and Manner. Yeah, so for what I do now, for Sportsnet and the NHL on Sportsnet, like I'll use tomorrow night as an example for Scotiabank Wednesday Night Hockey. So I'll put together, and I haven't yet, but a cheat sheet. So I'll kind of use it as an outline. So first today and even tomorrow, I'll be just doing research and reading, and I'll write down notes that I find interesting. I just kind of throw it on the page. And then it gets to organizing it and speaking with the producer and seeing what the rundown is and what the order of things is that we want to do. And then I'll kind of edit that outline as I see fit. But because I work on a show that doesn't have scripts and we don't have teleprompter, it really is my cheat sheet for the show, because we have the rundown, but the cheat sheet is kind of the notes for the rundown. And so in a show, I can kind of look down and think, oh, okay, I wanted to mention that stat, and this is interesting, and I want to make sure I get to this. It's also equally important, I find, to have a few things in your back pocket. So even a couple extra notes or things that I've read or things that I've even seen doing previous games that I might want to use at a later point if, say, we run out of time, or not run out of time, if we have too much time and I need to fill time. So yeah, I type up those notes, and it's usually on no more than 1 or 2 sheets of paper just to make it easy on me. And then throughout the evening, I'm just kind of destroying that page and destroying my rundown with a pen, scratching stuff out, adding things. I usually like to take a cue card for each intermission too, just so that it's easier for me to read than all the chicken scratch across my notes. So then I can see who the goal scorers are. I can see how many, I just put their name and what goal it is on the year, any other interesting facts, maybe the time between goals, some just little tidbits that I think could be worth sharing on air. But granted, I don't think I ever use everything on the page, but it's good to have more than you need. But it's also kind of, there's a thin line between having what you need and having too much that it kind of bogs you down. Yeah, so that's tough. The NHL, I will say, in a way, is easy because I'm in it the whole season. So it's cumulative. So once the first few games are in, it's the stories kind of start telling themselves. And especially with the amount of hockey I watch, I'm doing the prep as I'm watching the games. The Olympics is really challenging, as you said, because you're not aware of all the sports, at least not you don't watch it or keep tabs on it on a daily basis. So for me, what I find sometimes the most overwhelming is when you don't know something, there's a sometimes innate feeling that you need to prove that you know it. And that's what I think can get a lot of broadcasters in trouble. So what I do, especially if I'm feeling overwhelmed by, say, ski jump, and there's all these things I need to learn and all these athletes I need to focus on, is think of the person watching at home, whether they are a ski jump aficionado or if they're just a casual sports fan who knows less than I do, is okay, what do they need to know? Well, how are the Canadians doing? Who are the top kind of players in this sport? Any records? It just makes it easy to step back and kind of simplify and then kind of attack the research. But for the Olympics, I was actually thinking of this last night. I'm going to need to start pretty soon, since I'll be doing hockey right up to the Olympics. I'm going to need to start maybe carving out a time every weekend, or at least once a week. And then once January hits, I think every weekend I'll prep. But again, it's having the notes. Olympics especially, I don't use most of my notes, but there are times when I am so happy when I have 20 seconds to look something up that I have my binder prepared. So yeah, I think with experience too, you learn what you need on air and what you need to do the job. Because that's another thing I've noticed, is that all broadcasters do it differently. Like David Amber comes into work. I was working with him the other night. We're never on air together, but he's got a binder, and I've got my cheat sheet, and I'm thinking, what is in that binder? Like, I don't have a binder. I don't know what's right. And then I have my cheat sheet and I throw it out. I don't know if that's a good thing. Should I keep them? I don't. So sometimes you can kind of question yourself, but you just need to find what works for you, but it is helpful. And something like this is hearing and seeing what other people do, and then kind of using those as examples and see what fits for you. Yeah, I think it's more so work smarter, not harder. So I think I used to, as I kind of referenced, I just didn't know what I needed to prepare. So I had so many notes and so much info, which when you're live on air with limited time to think and no scripts, all those notes it's not going to be helpful, right? It's kind of like an exam. If you've ever been allowed to have a cheat sheet or something in the exam, like bringing the whole textbook is probably not going to be of use because you're not going to have time to find everything you need. So yeah, I think work smarter, not harder. And I'm better in the moments where I'm feeling overwhelmed or stressed or unsure of myself to, as I said, step back and think, okay, like look at this simply. What do I really need and what does the viewer need to know? Get that base information first, and then you can kind of sprinkle in some creativity or some different stats or facts. And another piece of advice I'll give is something that I learned too, is don't get bogged down by stats. Stats are great, but only if they help tell the story and tell the story clearly to the viewer. So it goes back to what I said about trying to prove what you know, is don't use it in that sense. Just try and simply use it as a way to communicate what your audience needs to know. So that's where you always need something in your back pocket. And even at this point in my career, sometimes I catch myself unprepared and I get really disappointed in myself. Like even there's a Hockey Central last week where I think I just assumed like a segment was going to go long and we'd have time. Silly me. And then we had, like I heard in my ear 1 minute and I thought, oh, okay, well, and I didn't panic or anything, but it was more so one of those situations where by the next show, I said to the two analysts, okay, if we have extra time, is there anything you want to touch on in this Pittsburgh game? Right? Because it's not just about me, it's about giving other people the heads up so that they know what's going on. So yeah, usually I like to have a couple things in my back pocket and usually an extra question or two for the analyst. But again, ones that hopefully they see coming. But depending on who I work with too and who's comfortable with it, you can also throw whatever at them. But yeah, it's usually also things that I purposely put as extras. So it's not, sometimes it's things we didn't have time to get to, but most of the time it's things that I think, okay, this could be a good added discussion or a good way to close or wrap this up. Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's kind of an evolving process. One thing that I know happens for me, and I think this happens to a lot of other people as well, is when we're nervous, sometimes our mind and our speaking speeds up. So we're talking really fast. And that's tricky when you're on TV, especially if you're nervous, because then sometimes your mouth can get ahead of your head. And it's a bit like a runaway train, and then you start tripping over your words. So that's something I recognize if I'm feeling a little nervous before a show, or even if I notice that my voice is racing while I'm live, is just take a break, take a pause. The pause is never as long as you think it is to the viewer, and really just take a breath. And then the other thing is, I know I keep going back to this, but is simplify, is walk before you can run. So even to start the season this year on our first Wednesday night, we're all discussing of let's just keep it simple. Let's not try and be too fancy or, come out of the gate guns blazing. Let's just focus on the basics. And then, as I said, then you can sprinkle in the creativity and build from there. So the same goes with when you're being nervous. It's never wrong to stick with the basics because that builds your confidence. And then as each moment of the show goes on and you can, okay, this is going okay, then you can build off of that. Something else that I kind of just self-taught myself early on in my career was, it was only about a 5-minute drive home when I was working on Sportsnet Central in Vancouver. And I kind of gave myself those 5 minutes in the car to either be really happy reflecting on the show or reflecting on the things that I didn't think I did well. And both are important because then you can take that with you into your next broadcast. But once I got out of the car, I kind of trained myself where, okay, that show's done. no need to dwell on the good or the bad, and I'll start fresh tomorrow. And that's been very helpful for me as well. And it's also a good lesson that I learned earlier than that in a broadcast. So if you screw up in the first block, if you focus on that and are frustrated by it, then it's more likely that you're going to be distracted and screw up later on in the show. So you need to, in the moment, quickly accept and acknowledge what happened. Try and think, okay, how can I prevent that from happening later? Maybe I need to slow down. Maybe I need to check my rundown, something like that. And then move on and pay attention to what's happening on air. So I'm not sure if that's compartmentalizing or very quickly dealing with it, accepting it, acknowledging it, and then moving on. Yeah, this has been tricky for me in my career. And early on, actually, when I moved to Vancouver, they got me a voice coach, which was very helpful. And long story short, what the voice coach helped me to do was speak more, kind of reminds me of being in choir back in the day as a kid, but speaking more from the diaphragm as opposed to kind of the nasally side of things, which doesn't sound very attractive. And so that actually really helped me in two ways. It helped kind of ground my voice and give a fuller sound. And it also helped me from straining it, because I found that by the end of a broadcast, I was losing my voice at times. And that's because naturally, for a lot of us, when the camera is a certain distance away, you forget that you have a mic on you and that you need to be talking to the camera, but the camera's not the person, the mic is right here. And something that I've done ever since is I always make sure with whoever's in audio that I can hear myself pretty loudly, I'd say more than most, in my ear. And what that does for me is it's a constant reminder and kind of check-in. So I can quickly tell if I'm straining my voice, if I'm being a little bit too loud, if I'm not bringing enough energy. And that's really helped me not over project, but use my voice, use the different range in my voice. Because there's a difference between using range and whispering or talking quietly and then getting more excited than just projecting being quiet or loud and straining your voice. So that's something that I'd actually suggest to a lot of students is play around with hearing your voice in your ear. For some people, it might be distracting. I know some people I work with, they don't like to hear it at all. It's really helped me. It's just like a live check-in. So for a host, I see my job as being a traffic cop. I need to tell the viewers what's going on and where they're looking and where they're headed. And I need to do the same for the analysts who are sitting next to me. So in that vein, it's my job really to set the analysts up and let them shine. That's how I view it. So it still means that I can be creative and have my little moments, but I take pride in making sure the analysts, regardless of their experience, are comfortable and they feel prepared for the show, and that they trust me that I'll take them down the right path. I won't throw something at them that'll catch them off guard, unless it's in a fun way. So I think you have as a host, it's a trusting role for the people who are sitting next to you and the viewer and everyone in the control room. It's kind of, in a way, it's a bit of a leadership position. And in turn, also for the analysts, I think in trusting you, then they'll also feel, it's like anyone being vulnerable. You'll feel more open to be vulnerable and be yourself and try some different things on air. So yeah, my focus is very much not on me, but on who I'm sitting next to and what I have to get across on air. It's also, I think, very important to listen. So a lot of times when you're on air, you're thinking, sure, of what comes next. Okay, I just heard a can in my ear. We need to go to a break. This is the last question. We need to go to break. Maybe I'll get this scenic break, so I'll need to figure out how to voice over that. But in focusing on all that, which you do have to be mindful of, you don't want to not be listening to what the analyst is saying. Because a lot of times you can either follow up, and that's the best question there is, opposed to a planned one, or you can use something they said to then segue into the break or into whatever comes next. So yeah, the way I see it is glorified traffic cop and be a very good listener. And then multitask, I guess, since there's the voices in your ear. Yeah, I think for everyone, what worked from my experience is just be a sponge and take in everything you can. Like everyone's going to finish at your school with the same degree or same diploma across the board at all the schools. So what is it that you bring that's different than that? And I just said yes to everything early on. So I was an intern, for instance, at Sportsnet 590, The Fan. And originally, like it was kind of cutting clips and go get coffee. But everything I was doing, I was trying to take in everything I could see and hear, and then asking questions of, oh, okay, why do you do it this way? What do you do that way? And then I built on that by then asking, oh, could I maybe record some things and you could listen to it? Yeah, sure. And then it builds from there. So really take advantage of the opportunities that you're in and the people that you're around, because that'll help you get better and move on up. And it's experience that, yes, you get experience in school, but that hands-on experience when you're actually out in the working world and the field is invaluable. And I even take that with me today. Is I love still networking, and not in a way, I'm not looking for another job. I'm not looking for anything selfishly, I wouldn't say, from people, but it's just it's interesting to understand, okay, what happens in your job and how did you get there? And it just gets your brain thinking and keeps you fresh. And I've just found it very helpful. And also, I would say, is try and understand as many jobs as you can, because that will make you better at your job and a better coworker. So if I have a deeper understanding of what producers go through, or what the makeup artist goes through, or the scheduling for a live event, I truly believe it makes me better, and it just makes me a better team player. I think, especially from a student's perspective, I think it's a huge positive. Because when I was in school, it was really like I could volunteer at Rogers TV, which I did, or try and get an internship in the summer. But now more than ever, I mean, you can all do things on your own. Like you can start your own podcast or vlog or do stuff on TikTok or Instagram. And I always use Steve Dangle as a good example. Like he literally built his career from his basement, right? And now he's someone that Sportsnet pays to do live Leafs broadcasts still from his home. Like it's incredible. So I think in that sense, for students and the next generation, it's really cool, because you're going to come up with stuff that we never fathomed in this industry. And I also think it makes broadcasting more accessible as a whole. So not just for students or people that may not originally dip their toe into it, but it even just makes it easier to last minute have someone on a broadcast, as opposed to years ago where you have to somehow get a camera to their house and pre-plan it. Now someone can hop on Zoom, and it's also just much more socially acceptable as a viewer. Like I don't think people really bat an eyelash when you see someone on Zoom from their home. It's not like, oh, this looks weird. It's like, oh no, yeah, they're just sitting at home on Zoom. I mean, Elliot did hockey night on Saturday from home. That would have never happened years ago. So yeah, I think it's good. In that same breath, though, I think it's important that we still keep the integrity of like good camera work and good production when we can. But I think there's a time and place for both. And so live event or live news and breaking news, I can see where Zoom is very helpful, podcasting, things like that. But if you're like Chris Simpson did a sit down with Austin Matthews on Saturday night, that was a better interview because she was there in person. And as a viewer, it was really well produced. So that's better than doing it over Zoom. So time and a place.